Thanks for coming this morning. We've got 15 or 20 minutes to cover a very important topic. I'm sure you're all tired of hearing about generative AI and security service edge, but we'll talk a little bit. I'll try to make it a little bit fun today. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Joe Topinka. I have more than 40 years of IT experience. I was a chief information officer for 25 years, and I'm now an advisor for Netskope. I'm also CEO of a $30 million, 200-person software and services company called Advanity Technologies. I'm also board chair of the Business Relationship Management Institute, if you're familiar with the BRM Institute. I've been working with them for almost 10 years now. And I've also written a book called IT Business Partnership. So I've been in and around the technology field for a very long time. And I've never experienced the kind of change that we're seeing and feeling right now. It's been unbelievable, actually. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Gartner's SASE model and Security Service Edge, just to set context for the day. I'm going to talk about the unprecedented growth of generative AI, especially since November when OpenAI released ChatGPT. We'll talk about the challenges that I'm seeing in the marketplace. I'll tell you how I see organizations responding. We'll talk about where Netskope fits in, and then I'll also talk about some other challenges that I'm seeing, and hopefully, if we have any time at all, maybe a little dialogue. I won't get into the model, but just for context, in case you haven't seen it, this is Gartner's SASE model, which they came out with in 2019, and about 2 years later, they refined the model and came out with a refined version that really focused on separating the wide area network and the security protocols. It's all designed around, creating a convergence of security and networking so that you can create a single cloud instance for security. And that's the model. And Netskope plays extraordinarily well in this space. When you think about generative AI and AI, and specifically the growth of ChatGPT has been unprecedented. It reached 100 million users in about 2 months, which is far faster than any technology adoption rate ever in the history of the world. Comparing that to, say, Facebook, which took 4 years, and Gmail took 5 years to get to that same level. So it's crazy. And since January, they've grown by 80%. So they're now pushing 200 million users. And they get about 1.4 to 1.8 billion visits per month on the site. So I've never seen anything quite like it. I'm sure you're all experienced with it by now. Anybody not use ChatGPT in the room? No one's, okay, a couple people brave enough to raise their hand. Check it out, we'll talk about it later on. When it first came out, it was fun to sort of see how people were using it. They're using it to play games, write resumes. ChatGPT passed the bar exam. So those were fun and amusing circumstances. And fast forward to 10 months later, and you now see there's a large language model for almost everything. I see more and more vendors showing up with generative AI solutions in business, starting with chatbots and data analytics. You're seeing now major players introduce ChatGPT built in. For example, Microsoft's Bing platform, they released an enterprise version of that over the summer months, and now they're rolling out Office 365 and Dynamics 365, their ERP platform, with that capability built in. And every other major player, including Netskope, has now adopted and has embraced this technology. And it's not stopping there. I think we're going to start seeing more conversational experiences with ChatGPT and generative AI specifically. For example, Wendy's is rolling out a generative AI-based order entry solution at the drive-thru. So they're testing it right now in Ohio, and they're going to be rolling that out across the U.S. Amazon just re-platformed the entire Alexa platform, and so sometime, later this year, you'll be able to have a conversation with Alexa instead of the one sentence commands that you're able to give it today. So they just announced that in September. I'm not surprised, but that's happening. And I honestly think that every company in this room will have some sort of proprietary large language model of their very own in the coming years. And I think the challenges that I'm seeing surround data privacy, unmonitored content. If you're using it to publish content, you have to make sure that content isn't biased, that it's not insensitive to you or your customers. There's a lot of already seeing copyright infringement issues surface legal and privacy issues, ethical issues. These are uncharted waters that we're in right now, and I think the court systems will help to shape where the boundaries are. But it's a fascinating challenge, and I think there's a lot that will have to unfold before we see where the parameters are. Congress is now looking at, they had Amazon in, Jeff Bezos in the other day, where they were talking about the deep fakes that are out there, and Alexa answering questions about the previous presidential election and giving false information. So there's more to be done on this front, and I'm sure we'll all be witnesses to it all. As I see organizations responding, especially earlier this year, the first thing enterprise risk managers do is they say, let's get ourselves a policy. I've helped several different companies write policies. Those are all often fun to write, but the first thing that happens when you write them, you start thinking about how in the heck are we going to enforce it? And you start getting into conversations around data governance. How are you going to protect the data? What data needs to be protected? Who should have access to the data? Who should have read access, write access? All of those sorts of things start to come up. And it becomes a real big challenge. And then the enforcement aspect of it. How many here in the room have policies now around generative AI? A handful, not as many as I thought. But that's the thing that I think people start with, is like, let's at least set some ground rules around how we intend to allow our employees and our company to use the platform. We'll see more on that front. Netskope has done something really interesting here. They were able to roll out with their SSC model the ability to provide a secure way to look at data across your whole network. They can see the traffic, they can see AI traffic, and with their engine, if you have the ability to define the sensitivity of your data, it can interact with that framework inside the system, and then it can actually provide guardrails around how employees are interacting with ChatGPT, for instance, no matter where they are, no matter what device they're on. So when that happens, it becomes a much more stable and seamless workload, and reduce risk. The way it works is there are three things it does. It has app usage and visibility across the network, so it sees what people are doing. And if you're using the data privacy component of Netskope, it'll actually coach users on information. So if they're trying to cut and paste sensitive data into a chat session on ChatGPT, it'll actually block them from doing that. I've got a couple examples here. This is a case where a user is trying to paste something in. It may not be highly classified information, but it's at least giving the user a warning that, hey, think about what you're doing before you do it, because once you share it, it's in the public domain. And this is a real example of someone who is trying to paste confidential information into a chat window, and in this case, it's actually blocking the user from doing it. So Netskope's one of the first to be on the market with a capability like this, and it's pretty compelling. This is when I talk to clients about writing policy. First thing I ask them is, how are you going to enforce it? And I point them right to Netskope, because I've had several of my clients actually adopt Netskope as their chief enforcement solution around this, and so the security teams are pretty excited about the capabilities there. I want to talk a little bit about some of the other challenges that I'm seeing in the marketplace. There are three sort of circumstances that sort of combined together. The maturity of the cloud. 15 years ago, I wouldn't have been standing here talking about all the different cloud platforms that are available, from infrastructure as a service to now software as a service. The volume of those capabilities and the maturity of those solutions now have reached an all-time peak. And you marry that up with the fact that you've got a lot of digital natives now in the workforce. And these are people who grew up with an iPad in their hand, and they're not afraid to procure technology on their own. And now we're seeing a ton of organizations allow for what we used to call shadow IT. Now you've got distributed decision models out there. I have a company here in the Raleigh area. It's a $1 billion organization, and they allow business units to procure their own technology solutions outside of IT, and that's a real phenomenon. And here again, you start to think about, how do you protect that data, and who's responsible for that data, and is a business unit really equipped to do that? And I'll talk more about that specifically. This has really changed, in my mind, the way I think about how IT should come to the table. Whether you're an IT leader or you're a cybersecurity leader, doesn't matter. But the old design, build, run model that we used to love and cherish when Gartner first came out with that. I've redefined it, and I call collaborate, integrate, and orchestrate the new CIO. And basically what I'm getting at here, if my fingers will cooperate, is a model that really acknowledges the maturity of the cloud. We're dealing with many more partners inside organizations. Boundary walls are coming down, so there's a lot more cross-functional organization and collaboration today. And we're now responsible for understanding what that cloud environment looks like, what the capabilities look like, and we're having to deal with more and more partners. And a big part of our job now is managing third-party vendor relationships and then marrying that up with what companies are trying to do to make sure that we're helping to drive the right value equation within the company. And that's the collaborate side. The integrate side is pulling all this data together, trying to figure out how to leverage the information and deliver it back in a cohesive way when you've got many different cloud instances out there. That's the integrate part. And then the orchestrate part, very simply, is delivering on the promise. When you set out to implement a new cloud solution, you probably had a business reason to do it. You want to make sure you're delivering on that promise, and you're monitoring the performance of that platform, and you're keeping the environment secure. So this is what I call the new CIO. This is the new way that I think IT organizations are looking at how they deliver value in companies. And so a lot of the roles that we used to have are going away. You don't need people to necessarily patch and keep software platforms up to snuff anymore. You rely on your cloud provider to do that. So it introduces a whole new set of circumstances. One of the challenges that I've seen my clients really wrestle with is this notion of the business unit deciding to purchase a platform on their own. Where does that leave IT? And I created a framework, which I'll talk about in a minute. But when I talk to enterprise risk managers about business units procuring solutions on their own, there's a series of questions you see on the left-hand side of the screen here, and I won't read them to you. But really, I'm all about trying to get them to understand they've got an expanded set of responsibilities in their role as a business unit leader when they're procuring software and technology for their business. And they're now taking on the role of enterprise risk, data privacy, cybersecurity. They need to understand how all that comes into play. This is really what I call the new digital transformation. These are business leaders now becoming much more familiar with enterprise risk, cybersecurity, and data privacy because they're actually out procuring solutions. They need to know about how these solutions play in the marketplace. The IT organizations that I talk to, really are struggling with this concept, and I created a set of terminology to help differentiate between solutions that IT manages and the solutions that a business unit manages. So anything that a business unit or that an IT organization is managing, and these are systems that are sanctioned by the organization. They say to IT, we're going to give you the budget, the people, and the resources to proactively manage a platform. That's what I call an advocated system. And anything outside of that is non-advocated. And I use this distinction because invariably what I've seen happen is a business unit gets in trouble and they invariably, there's a cybersecurity issue or a challenge. This is a real story. They get into trouble, they're over their skis, and they come right to IT and the cybersecurity team to ask for help. Of course, you have to give it to them. But then it creates a discussion about where does the responsibility for the care and feeding of that platform lie, and we have had discussions with executive management around shifting some of those responsibilities back to IT, or providing the business unit with the right skill set so that they are much better equipped to procure and deliver those solutions and keep the company's assets and information secure. I mention it just because I think this is a real phenomenon that we're dealing with. And I talk about interconnected guardrails. So when business units are looking at solutions, I try to underscore that there's a whole series, a whole framework around what you see on the screen in terms of thinking about the solutions they're procuring. These are things that we in IT are very familiar with. We've been out buying and implementing solutions for years. There's nothing new for us, but it's sometimes new for business unit leaders who've never had any experience in this space. I also have created a set of guardrails around each of the checkpoints, all the decision points that you think about when you're beginning your exploration for a cloud-based solution, for example. What are the requirements and how are you going to think about protecting the data? And all the way down through sunsetting a platform. There are a whole set of circumstances and thoughts that you need to consider when you're a cloud provider and when you're a business unit trying to procure those solutions. And that's where it really puts a lot of emphasis on data and privacy, and you need a partner that can actually help you get there and make sure that data is secure no matter whether it's an IT advocated system or a non-advocated system. And I think that's specifically where I think Netskope plays. Earlier this year in February, they passed all the other competitors in the market space in the Security Service Edge Magic Quadrant, and now Netskope is the market leader in that area. And I don't know if you've had a chance to stop by the booth and talk to that team, but it would be well worth your while to do so. We've got a few minutes left, just thought I'd open it up for a few questions. How many of you are playing with artificial intelligence and generative AI? Anybody in the room? Anybody willing to share any stories? Want to reveal them to the world? There's a camera here too, so we can post that on Facebook later on. Have you had any success so far, or is it just more experimentation? Mm-hmm.
What I found interesting is that use cases are so broad, so you can get so much out of it, for even creating images as well. So I think it's pretty interesting how broad it gets. I will say that with ChatGPT, it was working better. I was getting better results a few months back than I am now. Now I feel like
You've seen a marked difference? I don't know if anybody else seeing that too. I'm not. I use the paid version myself, but it's $20 a month. It's worth it. I use it almost every day. I do a fair amount of writing, and I'll have it outline content for me. But I find that it doesn't sound like me so I ended up having to rewrite quite a bit of it because I think and I know some IT leaders. There's one I'm not going to say the city because I don't want him to be identified, but he was never very public on social media. And earlier this year when ChatGPT came on the scene, he was posting something weekly, very long articles, which didn't sound like him at all, and you could absolutely tell it was generated by ChatGPT. So I think authenticity is really important when you're using it for content creation. How about security policies or policies around generative AI? I asked that question, how many of you are thinking about writing policies on that front? There's a few.
And so it's slowly worming its way in because of the expanding use, right? So companies are using it, but it's more at a high level.
Yeah.
A high level perspective. Again, because you're concerned about whether to put in.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the business units become more and more interested in using it more and more closely to the specifics around the work that we do. There needs to be more guardrails, right?
Right.
And so all the things that you mentioned,
Yeah.
once you write it, how do you enforce it? What do we have in the business policy?
Yeah.
None of those things, all of those things. I mean, so high level because we're using it high level, but there's an increasing need to become more specific and help folks understand the pros and cons of using it for things closer
Yeah.
to specific.
There's definitely a lot of. Go ahead. You're going to say something? Anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a pretty bad pause here around ChatGPT, but I've done lots of recruiting and interviewing, and in the past, I've seen people trying to cheat, but I've seen people trying to find the answer on Google, but now it's on ChatGPT. So my advice has been, you ask, you want the person you're going to interview to be on video. I would not accept interview without video, and I want to see their hands. I want to use enough time to stop interviewing.
I've heard people doing that. You know, they'll pause in between questions and they'll wait for a ChatGPT to help answer the questions.
In the past, it was more like a low tech.
Yeah.
I had a case where we interviewed somebody and then somebody else showed up at work.
Yeah.
So that was the first time. Now it's ChatGPT.
Well, I'm out of time at this point. It's a short session, but I really think this is a unique period in our evolution as a society and in technology, and I think there's a lot of uncharted territories, and it's going to take all of us as leaders to help our organizations, our families, and our friends through this whole transition, because it's going to have a very profound impact on jobs and on careers. I absolutely believe that that whole landscape is going to change in a big way. But if you know, on the data protection side, I would absolutely encourage you to check out the Netskope team upstairs. They're great guys. I've known them now for a little over a year, and what I love about them is they are in the market, listening constantly to what customers are asking for, and invariably what they hear in the market shows up in the products. It's been very impressive to watch. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.